Good day, everyone, and welcome to this INMA webinar on Newsday's predictive data analytics and how it's driving subscriber retention. My name is Earl Wilkinson. I'm the CEO of INMA, the International News Media Association. Each of you on this call is a member of the association, and this is a continuation of a webinar series that we've been ramping up in the last few months. INMA is going to continue to invest in ways to bring ideas and case studies to you in new and different ways. We've focused especially in the last year or two on data analytics, big data. We focused on a series of reports. We focused on it in a series of conferences, in presentations like this one. In fact, we've got a big data conference coming up in about 3 weeks. Our Big Data for Media Week is February 20th and 24th in London. It is a conference at Reuters headquarters in Canary Wharf. It is a study tour of some of the leading data analytics practitioners, both in traditional media and new media. We're especially excited about visiting IBM Watson and what they're doing in artificial intelligence. And then we're going to spend a day with the Financial Times and a deep dive in terms of idea exchange. So we continue to make investments in the big data space. It's 3 weeks away. We've got a special offer for those of you who registered for this webinar, and we'll let you know more about that later on. What I will give you in terms of background for this webinar is a little bit of a funny story. About 2 or 3 months ago, I was invited to a conference in Atlanta by Mather Economics. Many of you know Mather Economics, fantastic in terms of their focus on subscriber acquisition, retention, predictive analytics, and the like. And I was the keynote speaker. I was the first speaker, and I thought I did a pretty good job. When I was done, however, I found myself quickly outshined with a presentation by Newsday by Patrick Tornabene. Patrick is the Vice President of Audience Development and Analytics for Newsday, and he laid out the case for why and how data analytics can be practically applied at any news media company, big or small. As some of you know, in Patrick's role, his job title is VP of Audience Development and Analytics, but he's really the champion inside of Newsday for how to smartly apply data analytics to the company. And his presentation just blew me away. And I went up to him afterward. Patrick, you may remember this. And I said, with this webinar series in my mind, I said, this is the kind of thing we think that we need to get to INMA members all over the world. And in fact, we have several hundred people joining us today from, believe it or not, 40 different countries, 17 time zones, including some folks that are joining us at 2 in the morning in East Asia. A special welcome to you. My role in this webinar is just to introduce the webinar, which I'm doing now. I want to relay your questions to Patrick and the panel that he has selected and he's going to introduce. We're using the Zoom video system. If you take a look on your system, you'll see a Q&A, a question and answer module. If you have questions throughout this webinar, go ahead and submit it. It's sort of my role to synthesize all the questions and summarize those. And then at the appropriate moment, I'll ask Patrick and bring in his panel for that. Just a housekeeping item, by tomorrow, you will have a recording of this webinar available to you, and you will have Patrick's presentation. It is a deep dive into what Newsday is doing. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Patrick Tornabene.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the warm intro, Earl. Yeah, you bring me back to that meeting at Mather Economics, which sure was very interesting. I was asked to speak there, and I realized I was speaking right after you, and I said, boy, is this going to be a challenge of how well you connect with the audience and the content you have from reaching around the globe. But apparently we did a good job with it, and I really appreciate that acknowledgement. So our goal here absolutely is to share the things that we're doing and to engender discussion. We're hoping that you identify some opportunities here and comment on what we're doing, whether it's during the webinar, we'll be taking questions at the end, or even after. I put up on the screen here, you see our email addresses. We're absolutely interested in connecting. So with that, let me introduce the panelists that we have today. We have Eric Zenhausen, which oversees he's our Director of Acquisition and Retention, and he applies a lot of the analytical insights and attaches the marketing to it and goes to market with them. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Patrick. Thanks very much for the introduction.
We also have our lead data analytics here, Ned Kaufman, who identifies a lot of the analytical insights and does the modeling and identifies the lift that we are achieving. Good morning, Ned.
Thank you, Patrick. Good morning.
And as Earl mentioned, we have a very strong partnership with Mather Economics. They've helped us to be very efficient and very smart, have got us quick to market and things. Some intelligent models. We build models on top of theirs, and we identify how we operationalize these models. So we have with us joining this morning our senior analyst from Mather Economics, Brendan. Good morning, Brendan.
Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, everybody else. Happy to be here.
All right, I'd like to just start out at the top level of Newsday's market, just to give an idea of where we are on the globe, as this is such a global conference here. So we're located in 2 counties outside of New York City. Our core news is Nassau and Suffolk County here, right attached to the 5 boroughs of New York City. And our reach absolutely covers, obviously broader than that range, but covers New York City and into New York DMA and broader, specifically in digital. So I'd like to start off with the bottom line, really on industry monetization of why we really focused on data and what is bringing us to this webinar here. So I start off with this statement. It's somewhat of a bold statement that it's an audience business, that the innovations in audience revenue and growth strategies are imperative as this monetization, the core monetization continues to migrate from advertised to audience. So we've seen this over the past decade. This is nothing new. And it's absolutely not to make little of anything that we're doing in ad sales or any of other publishers are. But there's great opportunity in the second point that I make here, when you get down to audience data and analytics. And what we are going to be focusing on here is the applications. We hear a lot in the industry of the investments that are made in data and the returns. And we've been seeing some large returns with some smart modeling, with some basic applications. And we'll be going through those today. So my point there is the audience data analytics provides a depth of knowledge and opportunities which can provide significant revenue growth. And we'll be sharing with you what we've been achieving there. And another thing that we view here is that the audience data, second to the talent in the company, there's no question that the talent in any organization is the most valuable asset. But we put the data as a strong second, that will guide us as we go forward. And the bottom line on today's presentation, just to give you what we've accomplished here. So our data-driven analytic retention models have reduced our churn by 35% 12 months post-launch. And if we look back at the full year of 2016 versus 2015, it's been a 24% reduction. So we would naturally ask the question, well, how have you been performing prior to that? Was this low-hanging fruit or not? So prior to that, we looked at the past 5 years, and we look at our daily individually paid audited circulation. The daily in particular, because that's where there's more stickiness. And this is obviously audited by AAM. When we look at that, we're in the top 5 with the least decline among our top 25 US publishers. So that gives you some sense that this is being built not upon low-hanging fruit. And then during that window, well, what happened with rates? We actually doubled our subscriber rates over that 5-year period. So from here, we'll be sharing those 4 basic predictive analytic application case studies that is driving the retention and revenue. What's really driving this 35% at 12 months and a 24% full year? So on the agenda here, we've broken into 6 segments. We're going to start off with the soft data side on a data vision, what our imagination was. For those that might not be unfamiliar, what predictive analytics is, how understanding the science of habits really plays into this, and what is that really paradigm shift as it relates to data. That'll be our first segment. Our next segment will be broken into 4. We'll be going through the 4 case studies, and then we'll bring it to one step further of how predictive analytics, how we're looking at it to inform audience marketing and content development opportunities. As far as the questions, we welcome questions. We will be taking questions throughout, and I will be pausing at the end of each one of these 6 segments to review questions, and largely that's where the panelists will be jumping in to answer them. So with that, we'll proceed. I start off with this bold statement of saying imagination is more important than knowledge. And I think when it comes to data, you really have to understand what you want to do with it and bring an imagination to it before you put the intelligence first. We hear a lot in our industry and outside of the industry of the smarts behind the data, creating data lakes, the processes behind it, and we're hearing less than we would like to on how they're operationalizing it. And that's where we really focused, and we're hoping through this that we connect with more that are focusing in that area. So what has our imagination been here as it relates to retention and audience here? We've really focused on how could data inform us on the quality of the relationship we have with each and every one of our subscribers? What could it tell us about the engagement habits and dynamics for every one of our subscribers for the various touch points they have with our brands? As we know, there's many touch points from print to digital to emails to events, etc. We've identified about 18 of those. We want to understand how our subscribers engage with those touch points. What are their habits of routine? And what are the dynamics? Probability of canceling. What is the likelihood that an individual subscriber would cancel their subscription? A step further than that is why and when do they cancel their subscriptions? Building further upon that is when we start to influence them to stay with us. Which subscribers will and will not be influenced by retention treatments? Building further, how do we optimize those retention treatments and make them personalized for each individual subscriber? Then as we expand further, we say, yes, we've done a lot with increasing subscription rates, but what do we still have to do on the content development side to continue that and to improve our value proposition? So we look at what is the content types and consumption patterns that predict greater retention and price elasticity. So that's the imagination. Now we come to the knowledge, and it's predictive analytics that brings a lot of that knowledge. So what is predictive analytics? What is it and what does it do? In the simplest form, we broke it down here. It's advanced analytics. It's a mashup of data mining, statistics, modeling, machine learning. We've done all that here. Data science is a proactive, forward-looking anticipation of outcomes and behaviors based upon data and not a hunch or assumptions. When you get into the data, you're exploiting patterns, you're capturing relationships, you're identifying risk and opportunities. But ultimately what you're doing here is you're assigning a predicted score for each individual. An example here would be like a credit score. Each of us has been assigned a credit score by credit agencies, and that's based on the probability of failure. That's what we're doing here. It's the probability of failure on a subscription, engagement with a newsletter, response to a particular retention treatment, etc. And the modeling goes as far as to suggest actions and options to benefit from the predictions. And that's where it gets really cool. We'll be explaining all of this. What's really helped us here is matching and integrating our customer records. So we've had about 18 disparate audience data sources across the organization, from fulfillment and billing, digital engagement, email engagement, events, push notifications, our data management platform, into our contact center with speech analytics, and there's several more than here. We have about 18 to 20 that we identified. So in the past year, we've went through an entity resolution process, and aggregating these records has helped us to get a holistic view of each individual customer and how they engage with our brand and the various touch points. Churn modeling, that's been at the foundation of what we've been doing here. And what is churn modeling? It's predictive analytics identifying the steps and stages of why and when subscribers leave. It goes further to provide awareness, anticipation, and quantifiable metrics of churn risk for each individual subscriber. I mentioned habits before, and understanding the science of habits really complements and really helps you to identify what you do with predictive modeling. So really, what is a habit? If you go to dictionary.com, it says it's acquired behavior pattern followed until it becomes almost involuntary. A good example here is we drive to work in the morning. Much of that's done by habit. If you really thought back, you don't remember what you did at each moment. You just know that you left your house and you got to work. I recommend this title that really helps you to understand the science behind habits. The author here explains that habits and working with them to guide experiment and what might change. The thing that I identified here that I found very critical is that habits is there's a craving. So there's a cue, reward, and there's a cue, a craving, and a reward. And that craving could take 4 days or 100 hours to break. And that's when you really realize that our subscribers and our audience have engagement habits with our brand. And that could break within 4 days. So how do we know when to pinpoint these? And that's a lot of what I'm saying is that we monitor how our subscribers and audience engage with our brand. And when we see a habit changing, that's when we intervene. And that's where the data applies. So as I say, retention marketing here, start with identifying each individual subscriber's habits or routine of engagement with your touch points and experiment with stimulus when you detect a change in routine. So it's really focusing on how the customer engages with the brand rather than your product and what is engagement with the product. This will be the final slide before I'll pause for questions and before we move on to the next segment. And it's really about the data paradigm shift and the soft side of data. I start with predictive analytics over gut instinct. And the point here is that when you get into the data, it can often be at odds with the conventional way of thinking. Those of us that have done churn modeling have identified something that's at odds with the conventional way of thinking. If you go to your contact center, you look at complaints coming in. They could be for delivery, for billing. And traditionally, you would say, that's costing the company money. That's not a good thing for the customers disappointed. And I think we all know that a customer that has an issue and gets satisfied is more satisfied than a customer that never had an issue. But if you back it up a step from there, that customer calling in is actually a positive touch point and is demonstrating that they're more engaged with the brand and less likely to churn. That's an example of how analytics could be at odds with the conventional way of thinking. But the important point here is that it's really a careful balance between the art and science that exploits data analytics and will drive us forward. It's that balance that you have to find. The second point that I make here on this data paradigm shift is that you got to bring to the forefront in the business is what is the impact on audience satisfaction, retention, and price elasticity. That needs to be top of mind. I go back years, even decades ago, a lot of decisions around products have been made on ad revenue monetization, but not looking at audience revenue monetization. The decisions we make here include both, but we put a special attention to what does this mean to the audience, satisfaction, retention, and pricing. Next one I mentioned is brand engagement over platform consumption. And this is about understanding how the customer engages with the brand rather than starting with the product and understanding what is the consumption of a certain product. And finally, customer over product perspective and individualized over one size fit all. This is when you get into the opportunity again of focusing on the customer and marketing directly to the customer and your content delivery focused on it as well. So I'll pause there for any questions. Being that this is the opening, it might be largely for me, but if anyone wants to jump in with any question.
We get it done.
Well, Patrick, we've already got a question, and I'm just going to go straight to it. And, you know, what has been the predictive analytics finding over gut instinct that you found most surprising as you started down this path?
I think maybe elaborating on an example that I put forth is that any engagement with the brand is positive. It's about resolving it. Beyond that, I'm not sure. Maybe elaborate in further questions here. But I think that's pretty been the most interesting one out of the gate.
Well, maybe
Just to add to that point, sorry, Earl. So you mentioned, any engagement is important, and one of the key findings that we found with the churn model, especially, is that, an increased number of complaints over the past month or the past quarter actually leads to a lower churn score. So, you may think that someone complaining about the paper more may lead them to, stop or get fed up with the paper, but we're actually seeing that, it's showing that they're more engaged with the paper if they care enough to, complain about any issues that they have. So just to kind of reinforce Patrick's point there.
Another basic question that just came through for me. I'm just curious, as you tell this data story, you've ended on this slide, data paradigm shift. Is this a 6-month story, a 1-year story, a 5-year story? What's the Newsday data story?
Yeah, this is not a short period of time. I think when you really start wanting to apply data out of the gate, it can become very controversial. We're really understanding how subscribers engage with our brand. And I could go back years ago of one of the comments that I received when we first started to want to leverage data was, the comment was, does your family know what you do for a living? So it was kind of saying, are we going too far of understanding how subscribers engage with our brand? And my comment there was, this is what it is to be competitive, is understanding this. So I would say for any one component, it takes months to really make this shift. And overall, getting the company, we're still in this shift, and I think many are. And again, I stress that it's a careful balance between art and science, but it's not as fast as if you go back to operational data and machine data, where that's straightforward. When you get here, you have a lot of gut instinct that you really have to balance that and get people around the values of understanding from the customer's perspective when you've been so focused on the product perspective. Again, both are important. Those that are managing products, it's important to measure from the product perspective. But ultimately, this shift is really pushing us forward. So I would say it's months to years here, absolutely. 6-month segments to really sell ideas and years to make them operationalized.
Well, relative to that, we've got another question here. We've got a broad range of people who are deep into the data analytics process. They're in the middle lane, maybe even flirting with the fast lane, some in the slow lane. Here's the question: how do you recommend a media company get started with a data science project? What's the low-hanging fruit to pick up as you get started?
Yeah, the first application study is certainly low-hanging fruit and one of the easiest that we could do. And I would even say the second one is. It gets more complicated when we get to the third one. So with that point, I may just jump into the first one. This is
Sure.
So here's the 4. Dynamic messaging for engagement deviations, which we will be sharing based on payments, surprise and delight retention marketing, how we optimize surprise and delight, and then going further into niche product opt-ins. So these 4 are of increasing complexity. The first one could be designed based off data you have in your fulfillment system. Pretty simple in application, doesn't require any resolution at all. And even getting into the second one does to some extent as well. So I'll jump into the first one, and it should help to answer that question. So one of the first things we did is, again, back onto the habits of identifying the habits that customer has with a brand in churn modeling. Probably no surprise, in churn modeling, the payment timing is highly indicative of their propensity to churn. So what I'm saying here, a change in habit, particularly payment timing, is highly predictive of declining relevancy of product to consumer and subsequently consumer engagement. So if you didn't pay at your normal interval, it's likely that the product is losing relevancy to you and the company needs to intervene. So if you think from previously, I mentioned how a habit could change in 4 days. that's when you need to jump in. So further explaining the application, our communication sequence here during the renewal process is triggered by deviations from prior payment behaviors instead of a generic collections communication sequence applied to all subscribers. So to further explain, subscribers have different types of payment habits. Some pay upon receipt. If that person starts deviating from that, if we normally receive that payment 7 days after sending it out, and they deviate more than one standard deviation, their likelihood of churn is going up significantly. Whereas someone that pays maybe 30 or 60 days post-expire, it's a much longer window. So if you look at the traditional communication sequence, it's from the company's perspective saying a customer is 30 days expired, 60 days expired, maybe as far as 90 days expired for those that have windows that long. And that's when we're intervening, and at different points in between. But again, it's from the company's perspective of when that money's due. When you make this shift and look from the customer's perspective, you realize that the customer has a habit, a routine of payment, and then you bring into the science of habits, you realize that if that customer is deviating outside of their range of payment, one standard deviation, 4 days, that habit breaks, their likelihood of cancellation increases significantly. If we're waiting to 30 days expired, they're gone. That customer is already gone. So what we have done is we've applied this communication sequence based on deviations from prior payment behaviors. And this is the lift that we saw. And again, this obviously applies to people that pay by mail rather than credit card. But what we saw is 2 months after launch, about a 4% reduction in formers, test versus control. So the test was from the company perspective, what most of us have, based on days expired. And that's the control, obviously, and the test is based on the dynamic messaging. And what we saw 3 to 4 months after launch, so this is a couple invoices later, those receiving a dynamic messaging, we've reduced the former rate in the 13% range. So this is one of the basic cases that you could do with the data in your fulfillment system. The payment invoices going out is recorded, the payments coming in is recorded in your fulfillment system and billing. And this is simply where you could get started to show the balance of the company, what type of lift you could provide with data. So I hope that answers the question. And I'll pause here for additional questions, because this was the 2 slides in our second segment.
Out of curiosity, have you looked at any other habitual changes besides payment timing? And if so, have you enacted similar studies exploiting any other changes, again, beside payment timing?
Yeah, this is what we're sharing today is our basic cases. We're taking these same things and applying them elsewhere. We're building out models, particularly digital engagement, understanding customers' engagement with us digitally and how that might deviate. And as we have about 7 variables in there, from scroll depth to page reviewed to how many days in a week, etc. And the same sort of thing is understanding that habit and intervening when that habit changes. And that's in development right now.
And I might also add, Patrick, that in the churn model, I think kind of a major insight that various kinds of change behavior variables added significantly to the model over just state variables. So, example, if a person went from easy pay or automatic credit card to off of that, that was a major indicator. If they changed their the anchor content that they look at most frequently online, that was also a major indicator. Various things like that. So, and also this, I think this leads into the next slide, that change in the churn score was actually a stronger indicator of whether somebody was about to churn than just being at a high level per se.
Let me jump in here, folks, because we're getting sort of a machine gun approach to questions. I'm getting them via chat. Q&A. And to my ultimate irritation, someone just posted on my Facebook page. But you mentioned the average revenue per subscriber doubled. Was this subscription yield, subscription links, or upsell, cross-sell between products?
This is the actual revenue that a subscriber is paying us on an annual basis. So if we turn back 5 years ago, let's say it was at, making up a number, $100, which it was obviously significantly more. Today it's at $200. So it's that revenue we're realizing on average per subscription, not lengths, upsells or cross-sells between products.
And you might have just said it, but what was the percentage of formers prior to this case study?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand what that question is. We had a 13% reduction in formers. So when I say formers, is we don't look at stops per se, because the stops restart. We know that a non-payment stop is a form of collection, right? So we look at formers, meaning did that person not even come back? So hoping that answers the question.
Sure.
Again, if this is not, certainly feel free to ping one of us after this via email, and we'll respond offline.
Patrick, I think we need to keep moving.
We're going to move on to the second one, and it's going to really highlight what Ned was alluding to before, how the change in engagement is more relevant more indicative of stopping than the actual score. So our second application case study here is surprise and delight retention marketing. And the assumption here is that an unanticipated gift or gratitude will decrease the churn probability of subscribers. And the simple application is sending a gift or expression of gratitude to subscribers in two segments: those with a high probability of churn and those with accelerating probability of churn. And this will get into explaining what Ned was before. So what we did here was we identified subscribers with a high churn score. These are typically subscribers that have never developed deep engagement habits with our brands. They might have just started, they don't have a long tenure, they came in on a long rate, they didn't engage in different parts of our product suite, they might have only came on in print or only on in digital, didn't get into emails, didn't attend events, they just have a lower engagement with the product. So what we did is we started to target these people with surprise and delight items. We took segments and said, let's send them a portable smart device charger. Let's send them a coupon book, a gift card. Let's send them a greeting card. And what we found here for the largest cost item, obviously, a portable smart device charger, was that we reduced the former rate on these people 5 months post-application at 40% and at 9 months, 20%. So what that would mean is if we identified 100 subscribers with a churn score of 95, probability 100 would mean they stop, and another 100 with a 95, we simply sent one group a portable smart device charger, measure the former rate 5 months out, 40% less, 9 months out, 20% less. And we did this for the subsequent items here. So what we really found is those that really haven't engaged with the brands well, have a high probability of churn, it's a gift that really pays off well. Our second application, which Ned was alluding to before, was accelerating churn scores. So this is a customer most likely that has built some reasonably good engagement with our brand, but that engagement is diminishing. Their churn score could have changed the probability of failure, say, from 50 to 60, 60 to 70. They might have been looking at our digital products 5 days a week, spending 10 minutes a day. That might have declined to 4 days a week, 8 minutes. They might be opening emails less frequently. They might have not attended an event where they would have attended in the past. So what we found with these people is simply reaching out to them with a positive touch point of gratitude, thanking them for being a subscriber. We've reduced churn on that group, the former rate 27% at 5 months and 15% at 9 months. This has been very cost effective. These items cost us about 55 cents to send out. So I'll pause there. I know Ned added some, and I see a few more questions, and see if we can answer anything here.
Just to pick on Ned, because I can, you know, we just talked about high churn scores versus elevating churn scores. Can you explain that a little more for me? And did you find one approach was better than the other?
Right. Well, okay, so a high churn score is just a kind of a snapshot, and somewhat arbitrarily, we define that as being in the top 5 percentile of our customer file in terms of the score on the churn model. The accelerating churn means that they moved, within the space of a month, they moved from one category to one higher category, or maybe even more than that. And what we found in the study here is that looking at the high churn people, at a gross level, the more expensive and impactful gift had a greater effect, whereas with the accelerating churn people, just the simple touch point, just to let them know that we appreciate them, the greeting card was actually the most effective and by far the most cost effective.
Okay. Patrick, let's move on.
Absolutely. So you can see here in these past 2 slides that you naturally say, well, how do we optimize this, right? How do we get greater targeting? And that's where we entered net lift or persuasion modeling. And to explain what this is it identifies those people that we can influence, and it actually splits your subscribers into 3 groups. The first group is sure that they'll behave the way you want them to, even if you don't target them. These are the people that I say are staying with you so they can no longer have the capability to consume your content. No need at all to give them targeted retention efforts. Even if their score changes, they're not going anywhere. The next one is self-selectors. These are people that are likely to do the decision on their own. You could give them a retention effort, and you could even have an adverse effect. You may be touching out to them in a positive fashion, sending them those thank you notes because they have an accelerating churn score. And you might just be reminding them, I've been meaning to stop my subscription. I've been meaning to stop consuming your content. And really where the opportunity is you identify the swing, the persuadable people. Those are the ones that you can have a positive impact with retention modeling. They need some convincing and open to being convinced. And what we found is out of our population of paying audience is that 50% was sure, about 15% was self-selectors, and about 35% we were able to influence. And it somewhat makes sense there that the self-selectors is about 15%, because you have a natural churn. And what do we do here? The methodology was a machine learning, random forest learning, where we had 600 different trees for each subscriber. So it's really splitting these opportunities down. So I'll give some insight here. It gets somewhat complex. So here's a typical subscriber for greeting card treatment. The subscriber on the left is the typical self-selector. You can see in red here, they came on voluntarily. They're on Easy Pay, and they actually had 9 complaints in 16 days. This customer is thoroughly engaged. If we give them a greeting card, a thank you, our modeling is saying 5% more likely they will stop their subscription. They don't need any positive engagement. They just need their issue resolved. However, the one on the left, where they had to have some stimulus to subscribe, they came on direct mail, they're not on Easy Pay, and they've been with us longer. If we touch this person, we'd get a 7% net lift in retention. Second example for that charger treatment. Subscriber on the left here needs stimulus. If you look down, payment days, they're paying 57 days post-expire. They just received their second reminder. And our modeling fits into what Ned was saying before. It's that high churn probability, the 0.72. They have the 72 out of 100 score. Whereas a subscriber on the right probably doesn't want a charger. You can see they're mid-scale, mature. They came on voluntarily. They're already well engaged. Perhaps they already have a charger. So it's not going to rub them in a positive fashion. So here's where we get into details. So we've applied this net lift persuasion modeling on top of our churn modeling, on top of that surprise and delight. And what we found out was our application before with the churn modeling and surprise and delight, where you saw the results, our saves, we had a $200,000 spend, saving 600 subscribers, cost us $345 each. And when we optimized it through our persuasion modeling, we spent another $75,000, but saved another 3,700 subscribers and brought down the save cost to $65 each. Now you're getting into a range where it's a lot more cost effective than acquisition. And this is only at 9 months out, at 3 months out, I'm sorry, 90 days out. And you could see a lot of applications are lasting significantly longer than that. So that $65 is likely to be cut in half or a third. And just give an idea of how this optimized. Here's the screen print from before. This was the high churn probability subscribers, where if you look to the left, it was the smart device charger, which had the greatest impact. But that item cost us $15. The greeting card cost us 55 cents. So what we targeted out of the gate was, how do we take this negative impact of 15%? So those that we gave a greeting card to of high churn, we actually caused more churn. We layered the persuasion modeling on top, and we actually were able to deliver a 35% reduction in churn with the greeting card due to more precise targeting. To add a little color to this, everything we're doing here is with gifts and gratitude, and we're working on incorporating relevancy, meaning that we're speaking to the customer based on what their behavioral profile is. So that's the next development here. So again, I'll pause for questions. I know we threw quite a bit out here.
Look, we got a quick question here. What system do you use to get all of this subscriber data processed?
Yeah, so we went through any resolution. Mather Economics helped us largely there, and it's all housed in a Hadoop stack, and we have many analytical tools that people are querying it with. Mather's using a couple, we're using a couple here, whether it be SAS, Access, SQL. So pretty much this is all aggregated into an Hadoop stack.
Going back over the totality of this presentation, what kind of recommendation algorithms are you using?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe that's more for Ned or Brenda to answer, but a recommendation algorithm, meaning on content recommendation, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Okay, one other thing, again, I'm sort of balancing, questions are coming in usually just as you're advancing to the next section, but can you tell us where and how you determine the churn scores? Maybe, is that a Ned question?
I guess that would be a Brendan.
Sorry. Yeah, Brendan has built a churn model. Ned's identified the targets that we operationalize on, and Ned and company has built a persuasion modeling. So maybe we'll start with Brendan on a quick cover on that, and maybe Ned will jump onto it.
Yeah, so we developed a churn model here at Mather Economics. We're attempting to, identify qualities and behavioral changes, everything we've been talking about so far that may lead to a subscriber to stop. So we've developed that model here over several months, and yeah, that's how we developed the churn scores with the model output.
Right, and we've done, as part of the surprise and delight retention tests, we've segmented the file according to the churn model and noted the actual stop rate. And I would have to say that the correspondence between the prediction and the actual has been quite remarkable.
Well, that was one of the questions we got. How accurate is the churn model using test and train?
So, been very happy with that.
Yeah, extremely accurate. Yeah, if the model shows this person's going to stop, they are. So yes, it's been very accurate.
As a group, yeah.
Yes, as a group.
It looks like the persuasion model is actually augmenting that, that accuracy as well, kind of adding on top of it.
Yes, it is. It's optimizing it. Yes.
Right. We can identify it's a segmentation technique. Basically, we can look at smaller groups within the segment that are in general identified as high churn, and identify more finely, not necessarily who's more likely to churn, but which ones are more likely to respond positively to particular interventions.
What measures are you looking at to distinguish between the self-selectors and the swing persuadables? Thanks, Owen.
Well, okay, so that's based on the net lift model, and you can imagine, you picture your experimental design as kind of a 2x2 matrix. Do you intervene? Do you provide a treatment or not? Versus do they respond positively or not? So the self-selectors are people who actually, if you do give them a treatment, they're less likely to respond positively than if you don't give them a treatment. Whereas the swing people, you do give them a treatment, they're more likely to respond than if you don't give them a treatment. And so the results of the net lift model are, if you get a lift of a certain, over a certain threshold, and we use 2%, by giving them the treatment, then they're swing. And if they in fact get a negative lift of more than 2% by giving them the treatment, then that's what we call the self-selectors. And the variables that we found go into the model are fairly similar to what was in the Churn model. Their tenure, we actually use the Churn model score as one of the predictors in the net lift model. Some demographic variables, age and income, their characteristics of their subscription, the frequency of delivery, and whether they're on credit card, things like that.
One last question, and then I think we're going to go to the last case study. Is there anything particular to the content in these models, or could this approach be applied to any subscription business?
Yeah, these approaches can be applied to any subscription business or any form of it. Again, we're starting with basic applications here. This could be applied to acquisition. And I think of a simple way to explain that is with what net lift modeling does. It identifies, will a person convert only if contacted? So we ask the question all the time, right? We send out direct mail. And when some of those people responded anyhow. So what this modeling does is identify that. So again, if you're trying to build digital engagement in a digital arena, it'd be only if it's contacted.
Okay, well, Patrick, let's go on to that last case study.
Where's Martin?
All right, moving on to the next one. Very simple in concept, but with an interesting twist. The Churn model identifies content areas that predict rate of retention and price elasticity. So we understand what content consumption patterns are more indicative that a customer will stay with us, or we could price them higher. We couple this with research to aid in identifying product and development opportunities. So what we do here is when you identify an opportunity, provide additional products or content. And a key point here is on a no-charge opt-in basis. So instead of putting another product out there and charging for it, put it out there and let the customer just opt in for free. And you will see greater monetization that way in retention and price elasticity than charging for it out of the gate. And what you're really doing here is you're getting a larger audience for the product. And the concept I like to put here is that ask me to pay for something that I want, not so fast, right? I have to pay for it, but give me more of what I want, then charge me more for it. I'm not so fast to complain. That's pretty much the concept here. So what we did is we launched this one with a simple product that our research suggested that there was demand for a puzzle book. Many of us have puzzle books. What we're able to do here was develop one that was extremely high quality, very low on advertising, if any. It's an audience monetization model. Put it out there and said you could opt in for free. This is what we found. Upon opt-in, their churn probability of this audience that opted in, our modeling said they were 12% less likely to churn. This was simply on opting in. They didn't even get the product yet. What we went from there was, let's give them an additional price increase. Let's test this. Let's give them 5% more. At this time, we were doing 20% on average. We gave those that opted into our monthly puzzle book, brain vendors, 25% price increase on average. And here's the results at 10 weeks post-price increase. The stop rate for those that did not opt into brain vendors, the control group, was a 1.3%, where those that opted into the brain vendors was a 0.15%. So what you can almost see here is that they opted into the product. We built an audience that was about 2 or 3 times the size of a paid one. We price increased them 5% more, and they had much more favorable responses. There was an incremental amount that called to negotiate. That's what the revert is. That rate went up, but the bottom line, we realized significantly more revenue. Looking at 4 months post opt-in, there's a 50% reduction in their churn. So this audience that opted in to a monthly puzzle book, previous to opting in, had lower churn, and then we reduced their churn even further. So what you're doing is targeting highly engaged people of high revenue, of your higher price points, giving them more value, and reducing the churn on that segment and increasing the price elasticity there. So I'll pause for any related questions.
You know, I'm going to recommend, Patrick, I know you're kind of going to a closing. Let's go ahead and go to that closing,
Yes,
because we're starting to get some open-ended questions, very broad questions, and let's get to that.
Yeah, so we'll briefly touch on, not a case study, but how we're looking at predictive analytics to inform audience marketing and content development. So what we did here is the process was, we started with our print product and we're building it out for our digital now, was we survey subscribers on their print readership and satisfaction by content type. Then we examined the content type imbalance between interest and serve. So what that's simply saying is, how much interest do we have in a particular piece of content and how well are we serving that? Then we brought in our learnings with customer lifetime value and churn probability to optimize content for pricing and retention. So this is really where you make that shift of, yes, we have integrity in our news and we have to report to news, but when you get into a lot of the features that you choose to include in your product, particularly in the lifestyle arena, how much do you give of each one of them? A little bit of an eye chart here, but I'll explain what this is. What we have here on the x-axis is the demand for a particular piece of content, and what you have on the vertical axis, on the y, is how well we are serving that piece of content. The size of the bubble is the percentage of print content that we allocate to a particular piece, and what you would expect here for a total alignment between demand and serve is, across this blue axis, you would expect smaller blue bubbles in the lower left corner and larger blue bubbles in the upper right corner. So if you go to the lower right quadrant, where there's high demand and low serve, you would see numbers 1, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, these green. These are opportunities where we are serving less content than what the demand is. If you hone in on number 6 there, particularly in bright green, what that is saying, 13%, is these people have higher CLV. These are people that are more interested in our brand, already paying us more and saying, this piece of content, I want more of it. So if we develop this further, which this one we have a big strategy around developing, we're likely to increase retention and price elasticity. If you go on the other side to the reds, these are ones that we have low demand yet high serve. We may want to consider less coverage in these particular areas. There's no, in fact, if you look at number 31, they have lower customer lifetime value. So if we wanted to move forward and rebalance what we're serving, that might be an area to say, maybe you want to put less attention on it. The gold ones were very interesting. These were ones where the serve was higher than demand, but we're in essence getting paid for it. These people are giving us, they're worth more to us. So we're considering, is there some engagement expansions here? And then particularly interesting was number 2 in the bright blue that's behind number 18 in the top right. This is the one, high demand, high serve in a particular segment that believed that of high quality, they were worth 22% more. So this one's no surprise. This is our local unique content. Those people that believe our local unique content is of high quality their lifetime value to us is 22% more. So this speaks more to a marketing opportunity than a content development opportunity. The balance between demand and serve as well, the more people we can convince that that local content is of the highest quality, we have greater potential of increasing our revenue realization there. So a lot I threw out here, and open it up for some questions.
We've got a couple of questions going back to, I think you called it brain benders. How do you end up with the brain benders as an idea to deepen engagement with customers? What other ideas do you have on the table?
Yes, we have another one, largely tied to our roots of our product, which will be, it's somewhat not disclosed yet, but it'll be coming out in a couple months. But what we're looking for is, a lot of these opt-ins are things that you might not offer a wide interest to, right? That it's a little bit of a niche. And if you go back to the slide I have up there, number 15 and 11 in dark gray, these are ones that have reasonable demand, but very low serve. These would be good opportunities for niche opt-ins that you wouldn't want to put it in your broad product, but you would give it as a niche opt-in.
If you want to, do you have more slides, Patrick?
I might have a couple left. I think I have a conclusion here. We might jump to that one and still leave open for questions.
Hey, while you work with the tech on that, do you guys have 10, 15 more minutes if we have some more questions?
Yeah, we do. We could go long. I'll give you a recap on that last slide. Was that I'll get into our last one. So really through this bubble chart here, what we identified in that exercise was brand marketing opportunities where we have highest CLV, demand and serve, priority to expand coverage. You have high customer lifetime value, and you're serving it lower than what the demand is, so you would prioritize to expand coverage there. Another area to expand coverage, but not a priority, is where you have high readership and serve is lower than demand. The gray bubbles I commented on earlier are your niche products. You have high CLV and read, but moderate demand and low serve. And then again, I commented on the gold ones, the engagement expansion. So really to wrap it up, I would say, what has the total impact been? And this has been pretty interesting. As I opened it up, I said we saw a 35% reduction in attrition at 12 months and 24% full year, 2016 versus 2015. But it was real fun to watch as we operationalized churn modeling, and we went out with payment deviation messaging and surprise and delights and offered the niche product opt-ins. What we saw, the reduction in attrition, how you would interpret this, if you looked at the left side where it says 0%, if you assumed we were down 10,000 subscribers year over the year, or we had 1,000 stops in a week, whatever it may be, all the way on the right side, that 35% reduction would mean we were down to 6,500 or had 650 stops a week due to these applications. So with that said, that's the content. I want to pause for a moment for those that may have not asked questions. You could capture our email addresses here to certainly follow up. We welcome the opportunity to engage in further discussion. But as Earl mentioned, we could leave it open. We're available for several more minutes to take any questions.
So let me jump in and sort of merge a couple of questions together that we are getting. What in-house skill sets, now let's talk about the people equation. What in-house skill sets are required to make this model a success?
Yeah, maybe I'll let Ned jump in on, he's had the chief skill. I mean, a lot of the questions have resolved around the data side of this, and he's had the skill set here. We're bringing another asset on next week. Yeah. I mean, I'd give you a generic answer of highly analytical, but maybe Ned could jump in and give a little color.
Yeah, well, I mean, just in general, first of all, basic understanding of data and some familiarity with databases, how to connect all the different sources of data, and then just want experience in doing exploratory data analysis. Just if you just do some crosstabs and things like that, you can see a lot. So you can do things like that with Excel. And then if you want to get into more of the modeling, I mean, I use SAS myself, and we have a very, very, very smart analyst that we just hired who's really good at R. And you can do virtually anything with R. So, I mean, I guess just to summarize what I'm trying to say is that it kind of goes along a spectrum. You can do a lot with Access and Excel, and then to get into more sophisticated modeling, SAS is good. I think Brendan uses a different package, right? Brendan, what do you use?
Yeah, we mainly use Stata as well as some Python and some various querying languages.
Right, and R. I mean, you can't go wrong with R.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of what we focused on here was the basic applications, and you could get off the ground on the deviation messaging, which gives you some lift. If you already have a relationship with Mather or some other analytics firm, you could get off the ground with almost no analytical capabilities in-house. When it got into the surprise and delight, we absolutely needed someone here to identify targeting, etc. I'm sure you can rely on outside resources as well. But you could get off the ground with this with very little if you have external help. But ultimately, really leveraging the success is having some real power in analytics talent in-house.
Eric, you've got something to add to the organizational question, but your video equipment isn't helping. What can you tell us verbally?
No, unfortunately, my laptop died. But so one of the questions was about, what organizational structure do you need? What skill sets do you need? And I'll take a little bit higher view of that. You basically need four things. You need your data and your data infrastructure. You need the analysts that are going to be able to interpret that data for you. You need a marketing manager or someone who's going to coordinate these efforts, which that really falls to me and my team. And you need the help of your creative services team. And this also gets back to a point that Patrick was making about this has to be an organizational decision. So in the beginning, there were some conflicts or some head-butting between creative types that are looking at the best brand marketing that they can put out, and we're looking at targeting specific people, and direct response is really sort of a different science. So you need everyone in the organization to sort of buy into this idea in order to execute properly.
We're dancing around something. We did get a question about this, so let's just get into size. What size of team do you have to implement some of these strategies?
Yeah, we have 3 data-focused people here, bringing on a 4th, and then Eric has a marketing team there of about 4 or 5, and then we have a separate, more creative services team that helps us out, which is consider our consumer marketing, but not in a traditional sense of how many newspapers are aligned. I think you can get off the ground with 1 or 2 data people, and again, 1 or 2 on the consumer marketing side, less the creative.
And I'll add that these people are not necessarily all dedicated to the retention side of the business. My team is also responsible for acquisition and direct mail and telemarketing and field sales. So we're carving out some of the time of one of the marketing managers to spend on this. And our creative services team supports our advertising and product teams as well. So it's not, I don't want people to think you need a dedicated team to execute. You can use the resources you have in-house.
Yeah, and even on the analytics side, I mean, the 3 that I mentioned, not only acquisition, but they're largely focused on customer experience management as well. So it's a portion of their responsibilities.
Another great question we're getting right now. How has the analytics impacted on your overall subscriber base? It's obviously reduced churn, but have you applied to acquisition to grow overall subscribers?
Yeah, we led with retention, being that that's where the money was, but we absolutely are applying on the acquisition side in the early stages there, months into it. But we're absolutely applying propensity modeling and who's more likely to subscribe at what rates and what what we should be including in those campaigns. Again, which ones are persuadable, which ones are we wasting our money on, et cetera. Yeah, so yes, absolutely.
May I just ask, circling back to something you covered at the beginning of the presentation, and I just want to drill down a little bit deeper. We're talking about all of the positives of this, getting to the data piece of this. What was the #1 barrier at Newsday to get acceptance of data as a driver of both strategy and execution? Nobody is rushing to answer this question.
No, I'll take a shot since nobody else has. I think really it's getting the data organized. I mean, that's your first step. And we had data in databases for events, ticketing, and contests. And we had third-party data, and we had billing information, and we had subscriber information and fulfillment history. So it took a long time to get all this data and to get what Patrick originally talked about, the golden record of the customer, and that's always evolving. That's still going to need to be improved, and there's always ways to get a better idea of what your subscribers look like. But just getting it organized into one place, it's not just the technical aspects. Again, it comes back to the company making a commitment to using data in its day-to-day operations.
You know, one of the things I'm struck by in this presentation and this discussion and even the questions is what percentage of all this is data analytics and what percentage of this is marketing 101 enabled by data analytics? Patrick, you've sort of danced around that with me offline. I mean, a lot of this is stuff we wanted to do 20 and 25 years ago. We just didn't have the capability.
Yeah. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head with that one, is that it is basic applications that we're talking about here today, which fit into what you would say marketing 101, with really smart targeting and really smart data of who our customers are. Would love to have another one on more of the advanced things that we're doing, but we probably need more than an hour to explain. But I think you really hit it there. And we talked about that before we opened up the webinar on how much different is this than it was several years ago. It's a lot more smarter in targeting. It's a lot more revolving around the customer. I think of the things that were done previously was that, again, a lot on the ad side, that you had a certain type of product and you're looking for consumers of that product. What we're doing here is looking at how a customer engages with our brands. It's the customer at the center. When you think of that golden customer record, it's how they engage with our brand and preserving that and deciding how we develop content and marketing around their engagement with the brand.
We've got one more.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Eric.
I'd also add it's really more of a philosophical change than a technological change. It's moving from a product-oriented organization saying, okay, we produce this product every day and you're going to buy it, to understanding what the customer wants and indicating to him, hey, you have that content and here's where you can find it. It's more about a market-based process than a product-based process.
We've got another question from our audience. What efforts are undertaken to match content to the segments of user subscribers which are loyal or most wanted? And is it planned to tailor content and segments?
Yeah, this is a very good question. We're doing a lot of work here. The efforts we spoke about are generic in nature, that there's a target recipient, but what we're hitting them with is generic. And what we're doing there is we're going to be incorporating more relevancy in the content. And then the next stage is to hit them with the content that's most relevant to them, almost getting to the one-to-one marketing. On the content, if you get more into the digital arena of the content engagement, we're doing a lot of testing with personalization. What you have to be careful there is you have to hit the right content, right? It's a lot, if you get back to the persuasion modeling, is if you give something, you serve up the wrong thing, you could drive them away rather than driving more engagement. So yes, doing a lot of work there, but you got to be cautious with that. You got to test it a lot and improve your models.
Patrick, we could go on, and you teased us, and I hate you for teasing us about the really next generation stuff. So let me ask it a different way. If you had double or triple your budget in terms of the analytics field, what would you be doing more of?
Yeah, that's a good one too. We really operate here as if it has a positive ROI, we go with it. So I never feel that we're starved for budget, but I take that question answered in a way of where are opportunities where I think others are not could capitalize on with a spend. When you get into customer experience management, what happens to the contact center? I think a lot overlooked at. We look at our contact center. We have ours in-house. Outsourced it many years ago, brought it back, unrelated to data. The amount of revenue that's coming through there in cash flow, in stop saves and price increase negotiations, and what's out there with predictive modeling of matching emotion and personalities of customers to reps, there's good opportunity for lift there. And when you look at what's spent there compared to other portions of the industry, I think there's a good opportunity for lift there. And another portion is spreading what we're doing here in audience to other portions of the business, whether it be in content and ad sales. And we're in the early stages of doing that. So didn't answer the question directly, but I think it's 3 areas that you could look at. Really, what's going on in your contact center? We've been having a lot of conversations around that. We've done a lot of modeling, had a lot of success of really identifying what's driving our KPIs of stop saves, price increase negotiations, and satisfaction, and how that links back to churn and retention. And again, our ad side of the business has consumers as well. It's just a B2B relationship. There's a lot of things that can be done there similarly that we're looking at as well.
And I could add that you really just, it's not about throwing money at something, because a lot of this stuff takes time. We've been doing this over months and years in some cases. And in order to measure the effect that your treatments have, you've got to wait 90 days, 6 months before you really start to understand. So in some ways, you can add more resources, more computing power. You can try to find out more about content preferences. But at the end of the day, the real key is to keep going and to reiterate and to reinvent yourself. Keep gathering data and improving the model. I think it's more important to have the right mindset and the right talent than just to throw money at something.
Well, folks, I'm going to call time on that. We've got an extra 15 minutes out of our audience and our panelists. And I just really want to thank Patrick and Ned and Brendan and Eric and Edmund and everyone else, Katie, for organizing this as well. Thank you all for jumping on and participating. I think this has been a magnificent webinar. Look, it's not going to be the end for us. The conversation continues. We will continue. If you have questions of anyone on this webinar, you've got their email addresses. Send an email to me. I can relay it to them, and the conversation one-on-one can continue. We're going to continue with our webinar series. We're roughly coming out with 1 or 2 webinars per month. We have Facebook Live sessions we're doing. We want to be more active out there on this topic and others. And, for this data community that's emerging, remember, we've got Big Data Week in London in about 3 weeks. What an opportunity to continue this at a really high level. And on that note, I thank you very much on behalf of the International News Media Association. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all as well.